Hi all, and welcome to lessons 2 and 3, being a physicist. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe how sound travels through solids, liquids and gases in terms of particles, vibrations and energy. And you should also be able to state that sound cannot travel through a vacuum and explain why. So how are sounds made? Well, they're made because objects vibrate. So sound waves therefore need particles in order to travel for the vibrations. Sound waves transfer energy and they lose energy as they travel. Now this is why when you're quite far away from somebody, it's more difficult to hear them because the energy is being gradually lost with increasing distance. So, sounds on the move. We know that sound can travel through gases, such as the air, because we can hear each other. But can sound travel through solids and liquids too? Well, how can we tell? Have a think about an example of sound travelling through a solid or a liquid. Think about when you were in a swimming pool. So if you can, find a table in your house and I want you to put your ear against the table and ask somebody living in your house to tap the table with a spoon or a ruler. What do you hear? Well, you should be able to hear the sound very loudly. So this proves that sound does travel through solids. So what about sound through liquids? Sound travels very well underwater. In fact, some swimming pools have installed underwater speakers. However, because the sound doesn't travel well between mediums, between water and air, for example, when out of the water, you can't usually hear it. Did you know you can make your own underwater speaker using parts you may have at home? Now what you can do is watch the tutorial video below for an idea of how to do it. So far we've looked at sound travelling through gases because we can hear each other right now. Liquids, we've talked about sound travelling underwater and how some swimming pools put underwater speakers because sound travels very well through liquids. And solids. And again, if you've done that activity where you put your ear to a solid desk and get somebody else to bang the desk, we know that sound travels through solids. Now this is because sound needs particles to travel. And we can see in solids, liquids and gases, they're made of particles. The more particles, the better the sound travels. And this is why sound travels very well indeed through solids because they have, in solids, there are more particles. So the more particles, the better the sound travels. So now we're going to do an activity, sound in a vacuum. Now a vacuum basically means empty space, which means no particles at all. Remember there are particles in solids, liquids and gases. So here we have a bell jar with a bell in it. But the bell jar is a vacuum, there are no particles. Now we can tell that the bell is ringing because the wee lever is going to be moving. But we can't hear a sound, and that's because sound needs particles to travel. In space, no one can hear you scream because there are no particles. Sound cannot travel. So let's think about our summary. What would that look like? So sound can travel through solids, liquids and gases because there are particles, but not through a vacuum. Sound needs particles to vibrate and carry energy forward. So if there are particles, we get vibration, which carries the energy forward. So, can you describe how sound travels through solids, liquids and gases in terms of particles, vibrations and energy? Can we state that sound cannot travel through a vacuum? And explain why. So let's have a wee look at some questions. How are sounds made? Sounds are made by objects vibrating. Sound can travel because particles close to them can vibrate. Why is it that solids can travel through solids, liquids and gases? Because they all contain particles. As a sound wave travels, what does it lose? Energy. This is why we can't hear voices from very far away. Why can sound not travel through a vacuum? Because there are no particles. How are sounds made? By objects vibrating. Sounds can travel because particles close to them can vibrate. Why is it that sound can travel through solids, liquids and gases? Because they all contain particles. As a sine wave travels, what does it lose? It loses energy. This means we can't hear voices from very far away. Why can sound not travel through a vacuum? There are no particles. What do all waves transfer? Energy.